Now, the first thing I want to get out of the way is the idea that LSS could just scrap first edition and unlimited completely and merge it into one print run. And I don't think that they're going to do this. Yeah, it looks like I maybe got that one wrong. So with the Flesh and Blood 2.0 announcement also came the decision to scrap the first edition and unlimited box model that the game has been using for the past 6 sets. James himself said that because first edition needed to be printed so heavily so that players could get the cards, lest the product be bought up for stonks, it's made the product no longer the special thing that it was supposed to be. Now, I personally liked the first edition and unlimited split. I am primarily a player, but Flesh and Blood has also turned me into a collector and a teeny tiny bit of an investor. And I really mean teeny tiny. I like the idea of a product that has a little extra value to it, and then once it's sold out after a few months, they do a second wave of printing that isn't as special. In fact, this is exactly what Yu-Gi-Oh does. First edition and unlimited are basically the same except for one special foiling and the fact that first edition is limited to the first wave of product. But unfortunately, this isn't working for Flesh and Blood anymore. I imagine that LSS thought it would work the same way Yu-Gi-Oh does. The first wave of product would be first edition, it would come out, it would be a normal price, players and collectors alike would be able to buy it for a little while, and then once it's sold out, they release the unlimited to satiate more of the player demand. However, the perception of first edition Flesh and Blood was that it was a product to be heavily invested in right at release, which was driving prices through the roof before the product had even come out. And this had a very negative effect for players who were unable to get the cards at release. But now that we know that there's plenty of first edition, the market, mostly in the US, is now treating these boxes like they're some sort of toxic asset. So with all these crazy swings and negativity that surrounds the unlimited and first edition print runs, I don't really blame them for wanting to distance themselves from it. And so starting with the next set, Uprising, they are ditching the first edition and unlimited model, and they are going with a single box model, much the same as Magic the Gathering used to be. Cold foils are going to be made very rare. Their pull rates, especially for the legendaries and fabled, are going to be reduced from where they were, and for players there will also be rainbow foil versions of these rare cards that are actually getting an increased pull rate. The legendaries, which are typically the key equipment pieces people need, are going to be going from 1 in 96 packs to 1 in 80 packs, which is 2/3 of a box easier to pull than it was before. There are still some that think this is too rare and is going to keep the prices still too high, and maybe they're right, but I would much rather LSS take small steps to finding that sweet spot of legendary rarity rather than taking a huge leap and making them too cheap. People do need value in their boxes. And another change that they're making with cold foils is that they are moving them to the token slot of packs, which if you're just opening packs, this doesn't really matter at all, but if you're doing draft, this means that you can keep the cold foil and still take your draft pick for your deck. A+ on that decision. And those alternative and extended art cards that were exclusive to first edition, well, now those are going to be called marvels, and they're represented with a little triangle symbol. We have no idea whatsoever how rare these will be, but James White himself likened the triangle to half of a diamond, which is the fabled symbol. So my best guess is that we might have some less rare marvels that show up more frequently, but the most rare ones will be like a 1 in 20 box thing, since fableds are 1 in 40. And honestly, I'm good with these changes. Yeah, I did like the first edition and unlimited split, and I do wish that they could have made it work, but quite frankly, with how negative people are about the product, it makes sense why they would remove it. And the most common argument against this is that they could have released first edition as a limited print run and then put out unlimited at the same time, but James White himself said he doesn't want people to feel excluded from the product. He wants everybody to have a chance to pull a cold foil. Because if they did make first edition very small and release unlimited at the same time, we all know that first edition would be way too expensive for the average individual to get their hands on. But as I've established in a previous video, and James reiterated in this Flesh and Blood 2.0 article, the game is primarily for the players. And so it doesn't make sense to have the better product be exclusive to collectors and investors and be made practically unavailable to the average players, the people that the game is primarily for. The one thing I do wonder about is, would the first edition and unlimited print runs have worked in the long run though? If printing too much makes the game no longer special, would there not have been a point naturally where there were so many players that they just had to mass print first edition at some point anyways? I feel like the big problem is that they have to print enough first edition to satiate player demand while also making sure that it's available for the collectors and investors, because if they print too much, it's just going to get scooped up. Hell, even when they did print a ton of it, it didn't stop stores and distributors from holding onto the product and driving the prices up. But either way, It's clear that the first edition and unlimited print runs aren't working for the game, and so they've decided to scrap it and try the one box model. And I don't think that it's the end of the world and it's gonna kill the game like some people are saying. In fact, let's be real. In a couple of months, or hell, even a couple of weeks, people are gonna forget about it, they're not gonna be bothered, and we're all gonna move on with our lives. Yeah, it's a bit of a bummer for those who liked the first edition and unlimited split, but honestly, as long as the product is good, that's all I ultimately care about. So here's hoping that LSS knocks it out of the park with Uprising.